Chapter 3474. Bailey Hongzhuang furrowed her brows when she heard the sound. Such an ear-piercing sound could make one's scalp go numb, as if it could directly pierce one's soul. Even though they had already used their elemental energy to cover Shuang, the extremely penetrating sound continued to drill into their ears. If it were an ordinary person, their body would probably explode under such a sharp and piercing sound. The power of the sound wave could not be seen or touched, but its influence was extremely terrifying. If they could feel such discomfort from such a distance, Deep Beichin and the others who were fighting would definitely feel even more discomfort when faced with such a sound. In the next second, Bailey Hongzhuang's deep and dark phoenix eyes could not help but reveal a trace of sharpness. Ever since she had learned the art of zither music, she had not encountered many cultivators in this field. She did not expect that the first time she would compete with the other party in the art of zither music would be against a group of inanimate objects. Since it had already come to this point, then she would have a good fight with the other party and see who was stronger. Following that, Bailey Hongzhuang's zither music changed. The originally pleasant zither music suddenly became sharper. It was not as gentle as before, but was instead filled with sharpness and sternness. Feeling the change in the zither music, everyone could not help but look at Bailey Hongzhuang in astonishment. They did not know if there was any special reason for her sudden change in the zither music. However, everyone quickly understood the reason behind the change in the situation. This was because, following the change in the zither music, they suddenly realized that the sound that made them feel extremely uncomfortable had gradually weakened. Furthermore, they clearly noticed that the lich was still singing with all his might, and there was no sign of it weakening at all. As such, there was no other possibility other than Bailey Hongzhuang's zither music that could cause such a change. Shangguan Yingying's eyes lit up. She could not help but exclaim in her heart. She did not know that Bailey Hongzhuang's zither music was actually so powerful, and that she could even use such a method. Jing Tianlang also looked at Bailey Hongzhuang in astonishment. The effect of the zither music really surprised him. Just the effect from before was already very shocking. He did not expect the zither music to have other changes. Boom! Under Di Beichin's all-out attack, a lich died at his hands. Ren Ziheng and the others couldn't help but give Di Beichin a thumbs up when they saw how quickly he dealt with the lich. Originally, Di Beichin's strength was not the strongest in their team. Everyone was already very glad that they did not fall into any danger along the way. Who would have thought that Di Beichin would not only not be a burden to the team, but on the contrary, the fighting strength that he displayed was simply astonishing. Before this, no one had seen Di Beichin in action, so they weren't sure. But now that they had seen Di Beichin in action, they understood that Di Beichin definitely had the ability to fight above his level. If anyone underestimated Di Beichin because of his cultivation, they would definitely be the one to suffer in the end. Not only Di Beichin, but also Xiren's fighting strength was just as strong. This could not help but give Ren Ziheng and the others a misconception. It was as if these two disciples were not disciples of the outer palace, but disciples of the inner palace. This was because there was no sense of disharmony at all when they worked together. Chapter 3475. Listening to Chu Jinfeng's words, Di Beichin's lips curled into a smile as he said, "This is all thanks to everyone's cooperation. I was just lucky." Just like what he had heard, the lich's combat power was not very strong. It was just that the surrounding skeletons protecting the lich were very strong. Not only that, when he was about to launch a fatal attack on the lich, he was met with the lich's desperate counterattack. The sound was abnormally sharp and ear-piercing, which made him feel very uncomfortable. Seeing Di Beichin being so humble, Chu Jinfeng shook his head and smiled. "Junior brother Di, you're being too humble. Just from the fact that you were able to kill the lich, it already proves that your mental strength is not weak." Chu Jinfeng was very clear that if one's mental strength was not strong enough, it could very well damage one's mental strength. Therefore, even they had to be extra careful when dealing with the lich. Di Beichin's success had already exceeded their expectations. Ren Ziheng and the other cultivators also nodded. Generally speaking, this was not something that a first-time cultivator could do. Even they had to gradually understand the lich's characteristics before making a move. Did you guys notice that although the lich's chanting strength did not decrease, the influence on us has decreased by a lot? At this moment, a cultivator's astonished voice sounded. If it was any other day, just the sharp and ear-piercing sound when dealing with the lich would have given them a splitting headache. However, he clearly felt that the influence had decreased by a lot. Following this cultivator's words, everyone finally reacted. After thinking about it carefully, they realized that it was indeed the case. Instantly, their expressions became strange. That's right. If it was any other day, I wouldn't be able to accept being so close to the lich for so long. But now, it's actually able to persevere. It's really surprising. Bewitching quietly turned to look at Bailey Hongzhuang, who was sitting at the entrance of the cave and playing the zither. The smile and pride in his eyes deepened. If I'm not wrong, this should be related to my wife's zither music. Her zither music has also become sharper. Once this was said, everyone was slightly stunned. Then, a look of understanding appeared on their faces. I was wondering why the music suddenly changed. So it's because of this. Chu Jinfeng's face was full of admiration. Previously, we were helpless against this lich. I didn't expect that there would be such a way to restrain it. It's really amazing. Ren Ziheng agreed. Indeed, if there was someone who could help us restrain the lich's influence, then our situation wouldn't be so bad. If we can return alive this time, we'll really have to thank Junior's sister Bailey. The cultivators present were overjoyed. They had joined this small team with the determination to die. They did not expect that they would still have a chance to live. Naturally, they were overjoyed. After one of the liches was slain, the other 3 liches felt a strong sense of danger. Immediately, they increased the intensity of their incantations. Meanwhile, the surrounding skeletons quickly surrounded the 3 liches to protect them, preventing Bewitching and the others from breaking through their defensive line. However, while the liches were chanting with all their might, the influence of Bailey Hongzhuang's zither music was also increasing. After the 2 sound waves collided, they canceled each other out. Chapter 3476. Bailey Hongzhuang's 10 fingers fluttered in the air as the sound of the zither poured out from her hands. There was an endless stream of elemental energy flowing into her body from behind, supporting her to complete everything she wanted to do. Under such circumstances, she was not stingy with her elemental energy, so the effect was very good. In her line of sight, she noticed that Bewitching had successfully killed a lich, and her eyes couldn't help but reveal a joyful smile. Even if she couldn't fight side by side with Bewitching, she was still on the same side as Bewitching. Master, the increase in strength of these skeletons has been suppressed, and the influence of those lich has also been suppressed. You are really amazing. Xiaohei stayed beside Bailey Hongzhuang. Her round and bright eyes were filled with excitement. Previously, everyone was clearly in a hopeless situation, but she didn't expect that because of her master's actions, there was a possibility of turning the situation around. It was really amazing. As long as we can hold on for a while, I believe that Bewitching and the rest will be able to kill all the lich in return. Xiaobai's eyes were fixed on Bewitching and the rest who were fighting with the lich. Now that Bewitching and the rest had started to deal with the second lich, she believed that it wouldn't take long for them to finish off the second lich. Bailey Hongzhuang nodded lightly. Fortunately, everyone is gathered together and has abundant elemental energy. Otherwise, I won't be able to do it alone. Originally, when Bailey Hongzhuang agreed to run Zime's suggestion, she was a little uncertain in her heart, but after seeing that there were no problems until now, Bailey Hongzhuang was completely relieved. At this time, the most worried thing was the others. As long as everyone was willing to work together to overcome this crisis, there was still hope. Do your best, Hongzhuang. Shangguan Ying looked at Bailey Hongzhuang excitedly. Your musical skills are the bane of liches. In the past, she also knew that Bailey Hongzhuang was good at music, but most of the time, using music was not as simple and straightforward as directly using it. Therefore, Bailey Hongzhuang did not use it much. and she did not think that it was very powerful. However, today's scene changed Shangguan Yingying's impression of him greatly. Under such circumstances, no one's moves were as good as Bailey Hongzhuang's zither technique. Facts had proven that no matter what kind of move it was, it had a very powerful effect. It was just that the effect was different because of the strange environment. Jing Tianlang looked at Bailey Hongzhuang and said, "It's all up to you now. I hope you can maximize the effects of your music." Bailey Hongzhuang glanced at Jing Tianlang indifferently. She did not have a good impression of Jing Tianlang's previous attitude, but she also knew that the reason he did this was to ensure everyone's safe return. "I will do my best," Bailey Hongzhuang responded. Hearing this, Jing Tianlang's eyes changed slightly, but he did not say anything and turned to look at the front again. In fact, all of this did not take very long, but under such a depressing situation, it felt like time passed abnormally slowly. Chapter 3477. A cool breeze blew, and in this dark and quiet environment, there was a trace of a sweet and fishy smell. It blew away Bailey Hongzhuang's hair, faintly revealing her beautiful face. Her black hair was gloomy, and her white face was like a lotus flower emerging from the water, with an astonishing sense of beauty. A pair of pitch-black, bright phoenix eyes flickered with specks of starlight, like resplendent pearls, and revealed a firm and domineering aura that made people sigh in their hearts. The sound of Bailey Hongzhuang's zither was constantly changing. Whether it was the Lich or the skeleton army, she still didn't have enough understanding. Therefore, she could only constantly use various zither techniques to judge what kind of effect it would have. Maybe after these methods, there would be a method that would have the best effect on the skeleton army and the Lich. After Bailey Hongzhuang's zither music gradually changed, everyone discovered that the influence of the Lich's chanting had returned to its original state, but the speed of the skeleton army had been suppressed and reduced by a little. Bailey Hongzhuang's clear eyes constantly gazed at everything in the distance, observing the changes of the skeleton army and the Lich. She discovered that the situation had indeed changed, and she couldn't help but be astonished. In the past, when she was learning zither music techniques, she also knew that different zither music would have different effects, but she didn't expect that it would be so miraculous when dealing with the skeleton army. If she could use it properly, it would be of great help to everyone. After understanding this point, Bailey Hongzhuang changed the zither music back to the second type. At least when everyone was dealing with the Lich, the second type of zither music would achieve the best results. Because after blocking the sharp chanting of the Lich, everyone's mind would be less shaken when killing the Lich. Under the help of Bailey Hongzhuang's zither music, the pressure on Ren Ziheng's team was undoubtedly reduced by a lot. Compared to the situation that everyone had expected, the current situation was much better. Although there were unavoidable injuries, at least no one died, and this was already the best situation. Bang, bang, bang. Bewitching and the others continued to display their martial skills, blasting the skeletons in front of the Lich into dust. Countless skeletons rushed towards them, but everyone had already formed a formation to help each other. Not only were they protecting themselves, they were also doing their best to protect their teammates. Shortly after, the space in front of them was cleared, and the Lich was exposed to Ren Ziheng. Ren Ziheng's figure flashed as the essence force in his body surged out, attacking the Lich without hesitation. A strong gust of wind blew the Lich's cloak. When the hooded Lich saw Ren Ziheng approaching, its body kept retreating, and its voice became sharper. However, he also realized that his chanting had been suppressed. He was unable to make the cultivator in front of him lose his ability to attack. Crack! The sound of bones breaking could be heard, and the Lich's chanting stopped abruptly. His cloak was torn apart, revealing his skeletal torso. Seeing that the second Lich had been dealt with, everyone's faces lit up with joy. They had completed half of the quest. Chapter 3478. If it was any other day, a team of 40 or so people would not be able to withstand their attacks. However, they had been attacking for so long without any results, which made the skeletons extremely angry. The lich's sharp chanting stimulated the skeletons, and the army of skeletons began a new wave of attacks. Bailey Hongzhuang had become the main force in the cave. The injured practitioners were now channeling their yuan qi into Bailey Hongzhuang's body. If someone ran out of yuan qi, he would immediately retreat from Bailey Hongzhuang's back and recover his yuan qi on the other side. This was the only way they could continue to persevere. In the cave, Shangwan Yingying and Jing Tianlang cleaned up some of the surrounding skeletons from time to time. In order to help the team in front to the greatest extent, Bailey Hongzhuang's sound wave attack had changed into a straight-line attack, and the attack at the cave entrance was fan-shaped, so it was inevitable that some of the skeletons would be missed. However, these skeletons were nothing to them, so the two of them dealt with them quickly. Not long after, the third lich was successfully dealt with, and everyone saw the hope of success. However, the team also paid a certain price when dealing with the third lich. There were simply too many skeletons around, and the practitioners would be scratched by these skeletons if they were not careful. At this moment, if one looked carefully, one would notice that almost every practitioner had some sort of injury on their body. The edges of their bodies were emitting bits of black gas, which carried a fishy smell. There's only one left. Ren Ziheng wiped the sweat off his face. With 3 lich dead, the strength of these skeletons has decreased. Chu Jinfeng nodded, but his face was still not optimistic. However, we have already expended a lot of energy. If we don't deal with them quickly, I'm afraid we will be in danger. Let's give it our all. Ren Ziheng's eyes flashed with a serious look. Now that they had received all the help they could get, there was no other possibility of receiving any more help, so they could only rely on themselves. Chu Jinfeng, Di Beichen, Wen Ziren. Ren Ziheng turned to look at them. We will deal with the 4th lich, and the rest of you will be responsible for stopping these skeletons from approaching. Is there a problem? No problem. Almost at the moment Ren Ziheng announced his decision, everyone nodded and agreed without hesitation. In the next second, everyone surrounded Ren Ziheng and the others, using their own strength to help Deep Beichin and the others open up a path, so that they could maintain a certain amount of strength to deal with the liches. Now that there was only one lich left, it knew that it was in a very dangerous situation, so it struggled with all its might. All the skeletons surrounded the lich. As Di Beichen and the others got further and further away, Bailey Hongzhuang found that the effects of his zither technique had weakened. Suddenly, the zither music became dull and oppressive again. There was only one lich left, and its influence on everyone's minds had been greatly reduced. She believed that everyone would be able to bear it. Therefore, Bailey Hongzhuang decided to use this method to weaken the skeleton's fighting strength to the greatest extent. Chapter 3479. When the 4th lich saw Di Beichen and the others approaching, he screamed crazily. That sharp voice was almost able to pierce through people's eardrums, causing Di Beichen and the others to involuntarily stop their movements. Even with their ears covered with elemental energy, they still couldn't block out this extremely penetrating sound. It was as if the blood in their body was about to explode along with this sound. Many practitioners subconsciously covered their ears. This sound gave them a splitting headache and even made them forget where they were. Di Beichen only felt that the blood in his body was constantly boiling and agitating. Those weak blood vessels were constantly jumping, but they were emitting a power that made people's hearts palpitate. He tried his best to calm down his blood, but compared to the chanting of this lich, the effect of his efforts was extremely insignificant. How can this be? Di Beichen's eyes flashed with a frightened light. The previous 3 liches weren't this powerful. Compared to the lich he had dealt with before, this lich in front of him was simply an existence that defied the heavens. He even felt that these 2 liches weren't even the same species, because the difference in strength was just too great. Not only Di Beichen, but Ren Ziheng and the others were also looking at this lich in shock while trying their best to control themselves and not explode directly from this power. We have never encountered such a situation before. How can this lich's fighting strength be so strong? This is too scary. If this continues, I will not be able to control myself and will explode to death. A practitioner cried out in horror. He could even hear the sound of his blood exploding. He didn't dare to make any big movements, for fear that if he moved too much, his life would end here. Looking at the shock and unfamiliarity in the eyes of Ren Ziheng and the others, Bewitching already knew that this situation had exceeded all of their expectations. This won't do. Under this chanting, not to mention dealing with this lich, even surviving is very difficult. Chu Jinfeng's expression was abnormally solemn. Now he only felt that every movement was extremely difficult. How could there be any possibility of fighting? Ren Ziheng and the others looked at each other in dismay. What Chu Jinfeng said was the truth. Almost all of them were in the same situation. They couldn't get close at all. This was because the closer they got, the greater the pressure they had to endure. Then what should we do? Xiren frowned. Why don't we go back? I'm afraid we can't deal with this guy. Bewitching stared at the lich not far away. After a careful examination, he realized that this lich was indeed different from the previous ones. Look, this lich's spiritual fire seems to be brighter than the previous liches, and the color seems to be different as well. After listening to Bewitching's words, everyone took a closer look and immediately noticed the slight difference. Indeed, this lich's spiritual fire is much brighter, and the redness is much denser than the other liches. What's going on? Chu Jinfeng's eyes were filled with astonishment. He hadn't seen liches many times before and had never encountered such a situation. If Bewitching hadn't noticed it, he wouldn't have noticed it at all. Chapter 3480. When Ren Ziheng said this, everyone present could not help but be stunned. Their expressions immediately became abnormally ugly. If the lich had really evolved, it would mean that it would be even more difficult for them to deal with these skeletons in the future. The casualty rate would definitely increase greatly. Just the first level of the lich was already difficult for them to deal with, and the lich in front of them was simply too difficult for them to deal with. Even getting close to it was abnormally difficult. With their level of cultivation, there was a possibility that they would explode and die before they could even get close to it. This meant that they could only avoid this level of lich and not face it head-on. This was extremely terrifying. Lich can evolve. Xiren's eyes instantly widened. This fellow's influence was already very terrifying. If this fellow could evolve, wouldn't it create a huge problem for everyone? Ren Ziheng nodded. No matter what kind of species it is, there is always the possibility of evolution. Every time there is a certain number of skeletons, there will be a skeleton with extraordinary strength that will evolve. I have seen evolved skeletons before, but I have never seen an evolved lich. However, since skeletons can evolve, it is not impossible for a lich to evolve. This lich is obviously different from the other lich. If we can return alive, we must report this news. This is an incredible discovery, so everyone can be prepared. Chu Jinfeng's face was gloomy, and his voice was even more serious. When the lich saw that Ren Ziheng and the rest had stopped moving forward, it seemed to be very pleased. The chanting from its mouth became louder and louder, as if it already knew that this group of people would not be able to get close to it. Since we can't deal with this lich, let's retreat first. Bewitching's eyes flashed with a wise and deep light. Now that there is only one lich left, its influence has decreased by a lot. In addition, Hongzhuang's zither music can balance it out. If we retreat back to the cave, we still have a chance of survival. At this moment, continuing to delay here would only exhaust the yuan energy in their bodies. It was not beneficial to them at all. On the contrary, it was very likely that they would not even be able to return. Ren Ziheng and the rest also had the same thought in their hearts. Now that they were in a stalemate, their chances of returning to the cave would decrease by a little. They really could not afford to waste time. All right, Ren Ziheng immediately nodded. Let's retreat. As soon as he said that, the eyes of all the cultivators in the group lit up. Then, they all turned around and walked towards the cave. Inside the cave, Bailey Hongzhuang and the others also noticed the actions of Ren Ziheng and the others. They could not help but feel puzzled. They've already reached the fourth lich. Why are they retreating? Shangguan Yingying's eyes were filled with confusion. The plan to kill the 4 liches would have succeeded. Why would he choose to give up under such circumstances? Bailey Hongzhuang didn't stop working. When she saw Di Beichun and the others returning, she tried her best to clear the skeletons so that everyone could return safely. Something must have happened. Otherwise, they wouldn't have turned back so suddenly, Jing Tianlang said in a deep voice. Chapter 3481. The 4th Lich might be different? Jing Tianlang and Rin Zimei were astonished. This was the first time they had heard of such a theory. That can't be. The liches have always been the same. How can there be a difference? Rin Zimei frowned. Bailey Hongzhuang shook her head, but her attitude was very certain. This lich is indeed different. At least it's stronger than the previous 3. How do you know? I'm using my zither to resist the chanting of this lich. Every time a lich falls, the effect of the chanting will weaken. The previous 3 liches had the same effect, but this lich is different. According to my judgment, this lich's strength should be equivalent to the combined strength of the previous 2 liches. Bailey Hongzhuang's face glowed with confidence. Even though she didn't know much about the liches, she was certain that her judgment was correct. The reason why they retreated is probably because the chanting is too strong. They can't get close to it. This was the reason why sound waves were so powerful. When she was fighting against the liches, she had already discovered that their chanting had a certain destructive effect on blood. Once a cultivator got close to it, not only would their mind be attacked by the sound waves, but their blood would also be affected. The slightest mistake would cause them to explode. However, skeletons didn't have brains or blood. They were just skeletons, so it didn't affect them at all. Speaking of which, she had to admit that the lich was indeed a very strange creature. Hearing Bailey Hongzhuang's clear judgment, Jing Tianlang and Rin Zimei couldn't help but look at each other. Logically speaking, they should be the ones who understood the characteristics of the liches better. However, Bailey Hongzhuang's appearance made them feel like they understood the liches better. They couldn't find anything wrong with her analysis. Compared to Rin Ziheng and the others' performance, it seemed like this was the truth. I've been here many times, but I've never even heard of a lich, let alone seen one with my own eyes. Jing Tianlang was still in disbelief. He had never heard of such a situation before. Just because you haven't heard of it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. Just like this time, if I hadn't come to the wrong place to train, I wouldn't have known about the existence of the skeleton and the lich. Bailey Hongzhuang was very calm. After seeing the situation with the skeleton army and the lich, she understood that anything could happen in this world. If you think it's impossible, that's just your opinion. But the truth isn't like that. Hearing Bailey Hongzhuang's words, Jing Tianlang opened his mouth, but found himself unable to refute. Indeed, he couldn't say that he was experienced and knowledgeable, but his judgment was definitely correct. If it's really as you say, then the situation is much more complicated. Rin Zimei felt that Bailey Hongzhuang's words were somewhat credible. She knew her brother. If there were no unforeseen circumstances, they would never give up so easily. Chapter 3482. Hearing Shangguan Yingying's words, Jing Tianlang and the others' expressions changed. Indeed, the most important thing for them now was to help the team return to the cave. Although the plan to kill all of the liches wasn't completed, the pressure on them had decreased by a lot. Jing Tianlang glanced at the situation of the people behind Bailey Hongzhuang. Everyone was trying their best to channel Yuan Li into Bailey Hongzhuang, but the number of people channeling Yuan Li into her had decreased by a lot. The cultivators who had used up all of their Yuan Li were now closing their eyes in the cave to recover their Yuan Li. As for the remaining cultivators, they didn't know how long they could last. Rin Ziheng and the others were already 1,000 meters away. It didn't seem like a very long distance, but in this situation, it wasn't easy to walk back every 100 meters. As Rin Ziheng and the others were preparing to return to the cave, the lich noticed their intentions and was pleased with itself. Its chanting became even sharper. The group slaughtered the skeletons along the way as they approached the cave. However, They realized that the lich had chased after them after knowing that they couldn't kill it. It seemed that it wanted to take advantage of this opportunity to kill all of them. Damn it, this lich is actually following us and affecting our strength. Chu Jinfeng's expression became ugly. He only hoped that the lich would stay as far away from them as possible. Unfortunately, this guy was sticking to them like a piece of dog skin plaster, which made him extremely depressed. We can't care so much now. Let's do our best to retreat. Once we retreat to a certain distance, Junior Sister Bailey's zither music will be able to compete with the lich's chanting. The pressure on us will also decrease. Ren Ziheng's expression wasn't any better than Chu Jinfeng's. Originally, they were chasing after the lich, but now it was the lich that was chasing after them. Bailey Hongzhuang and the others in the cave also noticed this situation. Their eyes were filled with surprise. It seems that Junior Sister Bailey's deduction is correct. This lich is indeed different. Otherwise, it wouldn't be chasing after Big Brother. Rinzimei's eyes narrowed as she said in surprise. Jing Tianlang originally didn't believe Bailey Hongzhuang's judgment, but after seeing this scene, he had no choice but to believe it. This lich has been following them all this time. Looks like they're in a bad situation. Shangwan Yingying's eyes were filled with worry. She could feel that Xiren and the others were slowing down. Di Beichen endured the pressure of the lich's chanting as he advanced through the encirclement of the skeletons. The chanting became louder and louder, causing the attacks of the skeletons to become more and more powerful. Everyone who was already running out of spirit energy was no different from adding fuel to the fire. Suddenly, the lich's chanting changed, and a swamp suddenly appeared under their feet. The appearance of this quagmire was unexpected. No one had thought that such an unforeseen event would occur under such circumstances. By the time they reacted, several cultivators had already fallen into the quagmire. Di Beichen's reaction speed was extremely fast. His years of experience had made him exceptionally sensitive to danger. Therefore, he had reacted the moment the swamp appeared. His feet were wrapped in elemental energy, and he immediately dodged the swamp. Chapter 3483. Be careful! Di Beichen and the others had already shouted the moment they discovered the quagmire, reminding everyone of the danger. However, some of the cultivators in the middle of the swamp didn't even have time to react before they fell into the swamp. Chi-chi! A corrosive sound rang out, accompanied by a foul stench. Everyone was shocked to find that the cultivators who fell into the swamp were corroded into nothingness in the blink of an eye. Di Beichen reached out to save the other party, but he only managed to save one arm. Looking at the corroded state of the other arm, he couldn't help but feel a chill in his heart. In just a short moment, the cultivators who were fighting side by side with them had turned into corpse water. It was a little too terrifying. Many of them didn't even have the chance to scream before they disappeared after falling into the swamp. Seeing this scene with their own eyes, they couldn't help but be shocked. More than that, they felt an indescribable anger. Their teammates died in front of them just like that, and they didn't even have the chance to save them. How unbearable was that? Almost at this moment, everyone's eyes turned red. Even if they didn't have much contact with each other before, they were teammates who had gone through life and death together. And now, their lives were taken away by these guys who were already dead. Damn it! Xiren looked at the black swamp on the ground and couldn't help but curse. These things are too despicable. What the hell is this thing that suddenly appeared? This isn't a swamp, it's a corpse pool. Ren Ziheng's expression was extremely ugly. Their situation was already very bad, but they didn't expect that the corpse pool would cause them to lose almost half of their teammates. The team that wasn't big to begin with instantly shrunk, and they didn't even have the chance to save them. Although they didn't fall into the corpse pool, this incident had a huge impact on their morale. Corpse pool? Di Beichen raised his eyebrows. It was his first time hearing this name. Ren Ziheng nodded. Previously, when we were rushing to the cave, a swamp suddenly appeared on the ground. Many skeletons would appear from within and drag the cultivators down, making it impossible to guard against. However, there is something even more terrifying than a swamp, and that is the corpse pool. If you fall into a swamp, As long as you're rescued in time, there is still a chance of survival. But if it is a corpse pond, once you fall in, there is no possibility of survival. Ren Ziheng shook his head and sighed. The corpse pool is filled with corpse water produced by the corrosion of corpses. It's extremely corrosive. No matter what it is, it can instantly corrode into nothingness. However, the probability of this appearing is not very high. It's just that the scale of the skeleton army this time is too large, so even the corpse pool has appeared. What kind of nonsense is this? Each one is more disgusting than the last. Xiren's face was full of anger and disgust. When he first saw the skeleton army, he felt that these dead things were very disgusting. However, the things he encountered now were more complicated than the last. He could not help but feel a sense of helplessness at the same time. Chapter 3484. Due to this incident, almost everyone was in low spirits. Their morale had plummeted, and many of them had looks of despair in their eyes. They were already worried about whether they could make it back to the cave. Now that they had lost half of their fighting strength, they could no longer see any hope. In the cave, Bailey Hongzhuang and the others saw that half of the team had been suddenly lost, and the faces of the people who originally had some hope suddenly became very ugly. What was that? Bailey Hongzhuang turned to look at Jing Tianlang. Why do we lose so many people? In front of her was a sea of skeletons. She could only see that the team had suddenly decreased, but she didn't know why. It seems like a swamp appeared, and we fell in. Shangguan Yingying's face was ashen. Fortunately, Di Beichun and Xiren were safe. Otherwise, she wouldn't know what to do. Jing Tianlang shook his head and said, "This isn't a swamp. It's a corpse pool. Once we fall in, we won't even have a chance to save them." The corpse pool wouldn't appear so easily. Now that it suddenly appeared, it might have something to do with the last lich. Run Zime's expression was grave. The lich never chased after cultivators before. This lich is too special. Hearing this, Bailey Hongzhuang looked at Run Zime with a slightly surprised look. It seemed that the situation they encountered this time was much more dangerous than the situation Ren Zime and the others had encountered before. So to say, they were really lucky. Even with such a small probability, they were still able to encounter them. When they returned, they would have to properly thank those guys who allowed them to come here. This time, they had really seen the world. Di Beichun and the others were almost shrouded in a desperate atmosphere. They quickly said, "Everyone, don't lose confidence. We have to fight for this last hope." The probability of them returning alive was already very small. If everyone was so pessimistic, they could only die here together. No matter what, we have to go all out. Even if we die here in the end, we have to bury these skeletons with us. A determined look appeared on Chu Jinfeng's face. At this moment, he also felt that there was no hope of survival. However, he was unwilling to let these skeletons take advantage of him. At the very least, he had to drag enough skeletons down with him. That's right. Even if I die here, I'll make sure these guys die with me. Forget it, I won't be able to live until dawn anyway. I might as well stay here and fight with these guys. For a moment, many cultivators had frenzied looks on their faces. Crazy thoughts were spreading in their minds. Seeing everyone like this, Di Beichun's expression didn't become better. Instead, it became more serious. He didn't want everyone to give up hope. No matter how small the possibility was, they had to at least try. Don't despair, everyone. We may still have a chance to survive. As long as there is a glimmer of hope, we have to give it a try, Di Beichun said. Hearing Di Beichun's words, everyone still didn't have the slightest sign of improvement. Seeing this, Di Beichun couldn't help but frown. Now that they were surrounded, if they still couldn't unite, then it would really be over. Chapter 3485. Beichun. Bailey Hongzhuang stood up. When she noticed that Di Beichun and the others were in such a situation, she had already predicted what would happen next. Once everyone felt that they had no chance of survival, it was often the easiest choice for people to make. However, whether it was Di Beichun or Xiren, it was impossible for them to give up the hope of survival. Similarly, Bailey Hongzhuang and Shangguan Yingying would not watch them get into an accident in front of them. Hearing Bailey Hongzhuang's voice, Di Beichun also saw Bailey Hongzhuang. The two of them looked at each other and understood each other's decision. In the next moment, Bailey Hongzhuang directly said to Jing Tianlang and the others, "Under such circumstances, they can't come back alive. We have to rescue them." As soon as she said that, the expressions of the cultivators in the cave changed. Their gazes were very complicated. In their opinion, Di Beichun and the others were already dead. There was no chance of survival at all. If they continued to stay in the cave, they might be able to hold on until the next day. However, if they went out, it was very likely that they would all be wiped out. No matter who it was, everyone would have a selfish mentality, especially when facing death. Nothing was more important than one's own life. They can't come back alive. If we go out, we'll just be throwing our lives away. At this moment, a cultivator said with a sullen face. Hearing that, Shangguan Yingying's face immediately turned pale. They went out to win a chance for us to live. Now that they're in trouble, are we just going to sit back and do nothing? Things have already developed to this point. It's wise to cut our losses in time. Another cultivator agreed. You're all too cold-blooded. Shangguan Yingying looked at the crowd in disbelief. They were so united before, but now they had become so cold-blooded and heartless. She found it hard to accept the change. This is a choice that everyone often makes. If it's still possible, we'll naturally save them. However, given the current situation, they're already on the path to death. Whether we save them or not, the result will be the same. On the contrary, more people will die. The man glanced at Shangguan Yingying and said, "If it wasn't for Xiren being in that group, I'm sure you would have the same thoughts as me, haha." The man chuckled. In such an environment, it seemed particularly ironic. Shangguan Yingying glared at the man. "What do you know? I'm not as cold as you. People like you should die. Don't go too far." The man couldn't help but get angry after hearing Shangguan Yingying's words. Seeing the conflict between Shangguan Yingying and the man developing in this way, Bailey Hongzhuang couldn't help but raise her hand to stop their conflict. "Yingying, these selfish people have their own thoughts. We don't need to care too much." Bailey Hongzhuang's face was cold. In the next second, her eyes focused on the man. "No matter what reason you put on us, under such circumstances, as long as there's a glimmer of hope, I can't just watch my teammates die in front of us." Chapter 3486. I admit that a large part of the reason why I'm doing this is because Di Beichun is in the team. Bailey Hongzhuang's expression was calm. "I'm not a hero, but the reason why they're willing to stand out is to fight for some hope for us. Are we just going to watch them throw away their lives like this? Don't you feel the slightest bit of pain and guilt in your hearts when you see them lose their lives because of us? If everyone is as indifferent as you, I'm sure everyone will die." Bailey Hongzhuang's voice was cold. She never thought of herself as a hero or a savior, nor did she have much sympathy. However, after experiencing everyone's unity and sacrifice, she felt that everyone had become a single entity. Regardless of whether these people were trying to increase their strength or to eliminate the skeletons that threatened the Shengxian continent, they were at least contributing to the stability of the Shengxian continent. Sacrifices were often unavoidable, but as long as there was a glimmer of hope, they should not give up. Otherwise, they would be too indifferent. At least at this moment, Bailey Hongzhuang was unwilling to see everyone fall like this from the bottom of her heart. Following Bailey Hongzhuang's words, everyone's expression changed a little. It had to be said that these words had indeed touched the depths of their hearts. Looking at Bailey Hongzhuang like this, Jing Tianlang's gaze constantly changed. He never thought that Bailey Hongzhuang would be able to say something like this. It had greatly exceeded his expectations. Speaking of which, Bailey Hongzhuang was only an outer hall disciple. This was her first time coming to the training grounds of the inner hall disciples, yet she was able to have such awareness. In comparison, the awareness of the other inner hall disciples was much lower. All this time, Jing Tianlang had never taken Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three seriously. This was because he always felt that the four of them were putting on an act. After all, outer hall disciples did not have many opportunities to come into contact with Inner Hall disciples. Usually, Outer Hall disciples would not give up on the opportunity to befriend Inner Hall disciples. This would bring them a lot of convenience and benefit their lives in the Outer Hall. Even though Bailey Hongzhuang's previous performance had made him look at her in a new light, he had never thought that the former's awareness could reach such a level. I won't force all of you to follow me, but I hope that those who still have some courage and know how to be grateful can stand out. Bailey Hongzhuang stared at the people present. She did not know how many people would choose to stand up at this time, but she always believed that there would be people who would stand up. Junior sister Bailey is right. She's only an outer palace disciple, yet she's able to think this far. Yet, you all are still so selfish. Don't you feel ashamed? Renzime was the first to step forward. She had the same thoughts as Bailey Hongzhuang. Every time she saw a comrade fall in front of her, she felt terrible. Moreover, her big brother was also in this team. She absolutely cannot sit back and do nothing. Even if Bailey Hongzhuang hadn't stood up, she would have. In her opinion, if she were to shrink back now, it would be worse than death. They are just women, yet they have such determination. Could it be that a group of men like us can't compare to a few women? Chapter 3487. Sensing the burning gazes of Bailey Hongzhuang and the rest, the cultivators present had complicated expressions. Under the selflessness of Bailey Hongzhuang and the rest, they could not help but avert their gazes. Everyone knew that they should stand out under such circumstances, but no one was willing to give up their lives just like that. Now that more than half of the night had passed, as long as they persevered a little longer, there would be hope for survival. I'll go with you. At this moment, a cultivator took the lead and stood up. He walked to the side of Bailey Hongzhuang and the others, his face full of determination. Seeing the cultivator's appearance, Bailey Hongzhuang and the rest were pleasantly surprised. As long as one cultivator was willing to stand out, it would be great. After the cultivator stood out, the other cultivators gradually stood out as well. There were also their brothers and companions in the group. When no one stood out, they did not have the thought of being the first to stand out because they knew very well that there would be very few people who would be willing to stand out under such circumstances. However, now that someone had taken a lead, they naturally did not mind joining in. Previously, when they were still outer palace disciples, perhaps they were more indifferent. However, when they became inner palace disciples, they had been supporting each other during their daily training. Everything had changed. The reason why humans were different from demonic beasts was that they had emotions. Selfishness was unavoidable in many things, but sacrificing for emotions was the difference between humans and demonic beasts. I'll join too. At most, I'll perish together with these skeletons. Soon, cultivators stood out one after another. Looking at this scene, a touch of joy appeared on Bailey Hongzhuang's face. Fortunately, everyone still had a bit of courage and was not so cold. Although everyone was struggling and hesitating, in truth, all of this had happened in a short period of time. Bailey Hongzhuang did not have any other thoughts about the other cultivators who did not have the intention to stand out. People who walked different paths could not make plans together. In this world, it was impossible to expect everyone to have the same thoughts as one. However, these people were not worth befriending in the future, because leaving one's back to these indifferent cultivators could lead to betrayal at any time. Since everyone is ready, we will go out and kill a bloody path, and help them return to the cave. Bailey Hongzhuang's face was firm and decisive. She believed that nothing was impossible. Junior sister Bailey, what do you plan to do? Renzime looked at Bailey Hongzhuang. Although Bailey Hongzhuang was only an outer palace disciple, after everything that had happened, everyone felt that she was their backbone. The only thing we can do now is to fight our way out and meet up with them as soon as possible. I'll be at the front and use my zither music technique to attack these skeletons. The zither music technique will be released in an arc. Therefore, all of you can form a circle with me as the center. This is the most efficient way. However, I'll need your yuan power to support me. Bailey Hongzhuang looked solemn and serious. At a time like this, they could not afford to make any mistakes. In fact, when they made this decision, their lives were already hanging by a thread. Chapter 3488. Everyone was a cultivator who had experienced the world. After Bailey Hongzhuang explained the plan, they immediately understood what to do. Therefore, everything went smoothly. Let's go. As Bailey Hongzhuang's voice fell, everyone maintained their original formation and quickly set off. At the same time, Bewitching noticed Bailey Hongzhuang's call and understood Bailey Hongzhuang's idea. He immediately led his team closer to the cave. Everyone, don't despair. The cultivators in the cave have come out to meet us. Bewitching's voice sounded. Everyone, who was originally filled with despair, could not help but look in the direction of the cave after hearing Bewitching's words. In their line of sight, they saw Bailey Hongzhuang and a group of cultivators walking out of the cave together. Among them, Bailey Hongzhuang walked at the front of the team. The breeze blew, and her hair fluttered. Her white clothes accentuated her elegant and refined temperament. A guqin was in her hand. Her 5 fingers fluttered, and the sound of the guqin poured out. The surrounding skeletons retreated under the influence of the guqin sound. Around Bailey Hongzhuang, the other cultivators walked forward with her as the center. Seeing this scene, a glimmer of hope appeared in the eyes of the cultivators in Bewitching's team. Their hearts were filled with emotions. None of them thought that the other party would be willing to rescue them when they were already in a situation where they were going to die. This kind of gratitude arose spontaneously. They actually came out to meet us. A cultivator's words were filled with excitement, but his expression became a little depressed. With our current situation, it's really too difficult to go back alive. If they come out now, it's very likely that they'll be sending themselves to their deaths. Ren Ziheng and the others could not help but feel excited. The other party's actions were really timely, giving them a glimmer of hope in their despair. Everyone, don't think so much. As long as there is a glimmer of hope, we have to strive to survive. Bewitching's voice was slightly heavy. The situation in front of them was indeed very bad, but it was far from the point where they were desperate. Let's not waste time. Let's set off quickly. Ren Ziheng quickly understood all of this. They're already approaching us at full speed. We have to strive to be closer to them. As soon as these words came out, the cultivators present had a look of excitement on their faces. Without saying a word, they followed Ren Zixing's people and charged forward. Perhaps they saw hope, or perhaps they were moved by the other party's sacrifice. When a person was on the brink of death, their will to live was usually abnormally strong, and the power that erupted from them was not something that could be compared to usual. After Bailey Hongzhuang and the other cultivators in the cave, the cultivators in the cave looked at each other. They're just sending themselves to their deaths. That's right. It's almost daybreak now. As long as we can hold on until daybreak, we'll be able to survive. These lunatics are willing to throw away their lives. So what can we say? Then let them go. Heroes always feel that they are exceptionally great before they die. Chapter 3489. After Bailey Hongzhuang and the rest went out, they went all out. The sharp and smooth sound of the zither continuously flowed out from the gaps between their fingers. Very quickly, the area in front of Bailey Hongzhuang was cleared. Seeing this, everyone quickened their pace and quickly rushed in the direction of Bewitching and the rest. Their elemental energy was not abundant, so they could only conserve their elemental energy and move forward as fast as possible. At the same time, Bewitching and the rest were also trying their best to get closer to Li Hongzhang and the rest. Once they met up, their chances of survival would be greatly increased. Ren Zimei and the rest followed closely behind Bailey Hongzhuang. With Bailey Hongzhuang clearing the way, they felt that the influence of the skeletons was greatly reduced. Originally, the strength of the skeletons was greatly reduced under the suppression of Bailey Hongzhuang's zither music. After the Lich noticed Bailey Hongzhuang's actions, he immediately set her as his target. The Lich's chanting became louder and louder, constantly controlling the surrounding skeletons to attack Bailey Hongzhuang. He was very dissatisfied. His chanting had always been invincible, but now there was actually someone who could compete with him. After the Lich changed his target to Bailey Hongzhuang, Bewitching and the rest felt the pressure on them lessen. However, the pressure on Bailey Hongzhuang increased by a lot. Junior Bailey, this Lich seems to have changed his target to you. Rinzame, who was following closely behind Bailey Hongzhuang, noticed this scene and couldn't help but frown. Being targeted by a Lich was not a good thing. She could feel that Bailey Hongzhuang was under a lot of pressure, and the speed of her elemental energy consumption was greatly increased. Hearing this, Bailey Hongzhuang's expression didn't change. It's a good thing that he has shifted his attention to me. Now that he is further away from us, the pressure on us is also less. Originally, the Lich had been following Rin Zixing and the rest, but when the Lich changed his target to Bailey Hongzhuang, he began to use all his strength to get closer to Bailey Hongzhuang. Bailey Hongzhuang's eyes flashed with a strong desire to fight. She also wanted to have a good fight with this Lich. She wanted to know whether her zither music or the Lich's chanting was better. Moreover, this Lich was different from the other Liches. If she could get closer, she would be able to understand this Lich. Seeing that Bailey Hongzhuang could still remain calm in this situation, Rinzame's eyes couldn't help but admire her. The more it was in this kind of situation, the more one could see the fighting qualities of a practitioner. Even the practitioners in the group who had been fighting with the skeletons for many years couldn't help but be flustered in this dangerous situation. However, Bailey Hongzhuang was able to remain so calm in this training ground of the skeletons. This didn't mean that Bailey Hongzhuang was a newborn calf that was not afraid of the tiger, but it was because she had enough experience in dealing with this kind of danger. If she didn't see it with her own eyes, she would also find it hard to believe. However, she couldn't help but admit that after seeing Bailey Hongzhuang's confident appearance, even the panic in her heart had dissipated by a lot. She was sure that Bailey Hongzhuang would definitely not be a simple person in the future. Not only that, Di Beichen and the rest's fighting qualities were also not simple. Chapter 3490. The Lich's attention has been completely attracted by junior sister Bailey. Chu Jinfeng could not help but observe the situation after noticing that the pressure on them had been greatly reduced. He saw that the Lich had already abandoned them and was charging towards Bailey Hongzhuang's team. Di Beichen nodded slightly. Let's take advantage of the fact that the Lich's attention is not on us and quickly regroup. Won't junior sister Bailey and the rest be in danger? Our speed cannot be compared to the Lich's. Chu Jinfeng furrowed his brows. He was already extremely grateful that Bailey Hongzhuang and the rest had chosen to come to their aid in such a dangerous situation. He really did not want to see Bailey Hongzhuang and the rest in danger. Don't worry, since Hongzhuang has chosen to come to our aid, she has already made plans in her heart. There won't be any problems in the short term. The most important thing for us now is to regroup as soon as possible. Compared to Chu Jinfeng's anxiety, Di Beichen appeared to be much calmer. This was because he had already seen Bailey Hongzhuang's confidence when he exchanged glances with Bailey Hongzhuang. There was always a way out. The situation in front of them was far from the point of despair. Bang! The sound of a heavy object falling to the ground rang out. A cultivator had accidentally fallen to the ground under the attack of a skeleton. The number of skeletons was increasing, and they had already surrounded them. Their elemental energy could only support them for a few hundred meters. As the cultivator fell to the ground, the skeleton's attack immediately attacked the cultivator. It really wanted to trample on him. Seeing this scene, everyone immediately wanted to save the cultivator. However, the speed of the skeleton was simply too fast. They did not even have time to react and could only watch helplessly as the cultivator died in the hands of the skeleton. Just as everyone thought that the cultivator was definitely going to die, an unfamiliar energy suddenly exploded. The air was suddenly filled with a bloody aura. Di Beichen's aura suddenly increased. With lightning speed, he directly pulled the fallen cultivator behind him. At the same time, he exchanged a blow with the skeleton. Kacha! Under Di Beichen's fist, the skeleton fell to the ground and directly turned into slag. Seeing Di Beichen's thunderous actions, everyone couldn't help but be astonished. None of them had thought that Bewitching would have such strength. It seemed that they had underestimated Bewitching. Ren Ziheng looked at Bewitching in shock. Junior brother D, is this the blood aura field? Although he felt that the possibility of this was very small, Ren Ziheng still felt that this was undoubtedly the blood aura field. Because the demon training tower was on Penglai Island, everyone had always been interested in the inheritance of the killing aura. It was just that no one had been able to obtain it in the end. Under such circumstances, they had some understanding of the killing aura. Seeing that Ren Ziheng had guessed his blood aura field at a glance, Bewitching nodded and said, "Not bad. Senior brother Ren has good eyesight." His guess was confirmed by Bewitching. Ren Zixing's amazement in his heart became even stronger. He had long felt that Bewitching's performance was extraordinary. However, he did not know that Bewitching had obtained such an inheritance. He had tried to challenge the demon training tower. However, the difficulty was simply too high. Therefore, he could only choose to return with regret. However, Bewitching was able to obtain the inheritance of the blood aura field. Just this point alone was enough to prove his strength. Chapter 3491. Previously, Ren Ziheng had always thought highly of Bewitching, but he did not regard Bewitching as a cultivator who could be on par with him. Now, however, it seemed that Bewitching's development potential might be stronger than his. Firstly, Bewitching was still very young, but he had already reached such a cultivation level. Secondly, Bewitching was able to obtain the inheritance of the blood aura field, which proved that his cultivation talent was much stronger than ordinary cultivators. Now, Bewitching's strength was not as good as his only because he had cultivated for a shorter time. With the eruption of the blood aura field, Bewitching's cultivation was not far from his. As long as Bewitching was given some more time, it was very likely that he would surpass him. Faintly, Ren Ziheng was certain that Bewitching would definitely be a member of the Inner Palace Disciples in the future. Moreover, he would be an extremely terrifying cultivator. Not only Ren Ziheng, but Chu Jinfeng and other cultivators could not help but look at Bewitching in a new light. The blood aura field, that was something that only 1 in 10,000 cultivators could obtain. It was said to be 1 in 10,000, but in fact, it was 1 in 10 million. Junior brother D, I really didn't expect you to have such strength. Just on this point, I can't compare with you. Chu Jinfeng patted Bewitching's shoulder, and his attitude quietly changed a little. No matter where, strength would always be taken seriously. Just on this point, they already knew that Bewitching's position in the Penglai Palace would definitely not be low in the future. Now, they were Inner Palace disciples, and Bewitching was just an Outer Palace disciple. His position was not comparable to theirs, but presumably it would not be long before Bewitching's position would reach the same level as theirs, or even surpass them. Senior brother, you are too modest. Bewitching's expression did not change. His handsome face was still full of determination. He had not used the blood aura field because it consumed his primary energy faster. With all his current primary energy, he could not support it for long. Junior brother D, thank you for saving my life. The cultivator who was saved also recovered at this moment and looked at Bewitching gratefully. If Bewitching's speed was not fast enough, he would have lost his life. Bewitching smiled faintly. It's what I should do. Senior brother, you don't have to mind. Ji Xiaoyu shook his head. I can't thank you enough. Junior brother D saved my life. I will definitely remember this. Just how dangerous was the situation? If Bewitching had not saved him in time, he would have already become a ghost under the hands of the skeletons. Just now, he had almost given up all hope. He didn't think that he would be able to survive. His emotions were extremely complicated. Seeing was, this matters. S's. It all happened in the blink of an eye. Everyone did not waste too much time because of this matter. Instead, they continued to try their best to get closer to Bailey Hongzhuang and the others. As the crowd got closer and closer to Bailey Hongzhuang, they found that under the sound of the zither, the skeleton's fighting strength had weakened a lot, so they moved faster. Everyone's eyes flashed with the light of hope. As long as they could gather together, there was a rare hope of survival. Chapter 3492. Oh my God, this lich's chanting is too terrifying. I feel like my head is about to explode. Shangwan Ying frowned. Her pretty little face was pale, revealing her pain and discomfort. This lich's chanting is indeed different from other liches. This chanting is far from comparable to the other liches I've encountered before. Renzime also discovered that this lich was not ordinary. Previously, because they were far away, she could not feel it clearly. However, as they got closer, she discovered that this lich's chanting was extremely powerful. Bailey Hongzhuang also looked at the lich in front of her. Previously, she was only able to resist the lich's chanting from a distance. She did not understand the chanting strength of the lich. Only now did she discover that this lich's chanting directly attacked the human brain. Moreover, it also had a certain effect on the blood. There is a slight difference between this sound wave and her zither music attack. Her zither music affected the entire body and did not focus on any particular part. However, she could still achieve this under her control. But when it came to attacking the blood, she was still inferior to him. In a short period of time, Bailey Hongzhuang had already understood why the lich's chanting was beneficial to the skeletons, but had a suppressive effect on the practitioners. Because the skeletons did not have a brain or blood, this attack had no effect on the skeletons. On the other hand, the chanting had a good effect on the strength of the skeletons, which could increase the fighting strength of the skeletons. However, the effect on the practitioners was different. The practitioners' blood and brain had already endured the impact of the sound wave, and their bones had also expanded. This kind of power would only cause the blood and body to surge even more, resulting in a body explosion effect. This kind of skeleton is really mysterious. Bailey Hongzhuang could not help but sigh. Not only did the human practitioners have all kinds of wisdom, even the fallen practitioners also had the power to turn something rotten into something magical. Bailey Hongzhuang's group slowed down. The skeletons stared at Bailey Hongzhuang from 100 meters away. It was clearly a pair of empty eyes, but she could still see the mischievous smile in them. Bailey Hongzhuang had a feeling that this lich was eyeing her. Do liches have intelligence? Bailey Hongzhuang couldn't help but ask. Hearing Bailey Hongzhuang's question, Rinzime couldn't help but stare blankly as she said, "It can't be. Liches shouldn't have any intelligence. Although they are a higher level than skeletons, there isn't much of a difference." Bailey Hongzhuang faintly glanced at Rinzime and retracted her gaze. She did not dwell on this issue. Obviously, Rinzime and the others didn't know much about this new lich, so her question was probably meaningless. However, Rode had a strong premonition that this lich had a mind of its own. The fact that it was staring at Rode meant that Rode was its biggest opponent. In the next second, Bailey Hongzhuang noticed a strange smile on the lich's face. Following that, the lich's chanting suddenly became louder, and the target of this chanting was obviously Rode. A sound wave attack directly attacked Bailey Hongzhuang. Seeing this, Bailey Hongzhuang did not panic. She changed the sound of her zither, and an even stronger sound welcomed the lich's chanting. Zither. Chapter 3493. Seeing the result of the battle between Bailey Hongzhuang and the lich, the cultivators in the group were all shocked. Everyone, pay attention. Stand within the range of my zither's protection. Once you step out of the range, you will have to bear the combined effect of the two attacks. There is a high chance that your body will explode and you will die. Bailey Hongzhuang warned everyone. Following Bailey Hongzhuang's words, everyone realized the importance of this situation. They immediately maintained their distance from Bailey Hongzhuang, not daring to stray too far away. Bailey Hongzhuang's 5 fingers fluttered in the wind. The zither's music poured out faster and faster, causing everyone to be dazzled. At the same time, everyone could feel that the energy in the zither's music was getting denser and denser. Bailey Hongzhuang's spirit energy consumption was also increasing. Bailey Hongzhuang's eyes were fixed on the lich not far away. This was a battle between her and the lich. Ding, ding, dang, dang. The sound of pearls falling on a jade plate continuously rang out. Compared to Wu Yao's unbearable chanting, Bailey Hongzhuang's zither music was much more pleasing to the ears. As Bailey Hongzhuang's zither music increased in intensity, everyone received Bailey Hongzhuang's protection. The unbearable feeling also lessened by a lot. In an instant, the situation was under control. The surrounding skeletons were also falling down. However, no one felt happy because the lich had successfully slowed down their movement speed, causing them to stay in the same place for a long time. Master, I'm afraid that we can't continue to stay in the same place. The speed of our advancement is too slow. Xiao He frowned. If they didn't get rid of the lich quickly, they would have to stay here forever. Bailey Hongzhuang's zither music didn't stop. Her beautiful face also had a trace of seriousness. She originally wanted to use her zither music to get rid of the lich. However, after having a real battle with the lich, she realized that her skill in this aspect was actually not much different from the lich. It was obviously very difficult to subdue the lich in a short period of time. Bailey Hongzhuang tried to get closer to the lich. However, the lich was very cunning. When it saw Bailey Hongzhuang's intention to get closer, it retreated a bit. It also realized that Bailey Hongzhuang's strength was not weaker than it. If the two of them got closer, it wouldn't have any advantage. This lich is very cunning. Bailey Hongzhuang frowned. This wasn't a good thing. Bailey Hongzhuang raised her eyes and looked in the direction of Di Bei-chun and the others. Originally, the distance of 1,000 meters had been reduced to 500 meters. Looking at this scene, Bailey Hongzhuang's gaze deepened. It was obvious that she was thinking about something. She couldn't use her zither music to get rid of the lich. The other cultivators couldn't get more than 10 meters away from her. In addition to the layers of skeletons, she had to find another way to get rid of the lich. Hongzhuang, what should we do next? Shang Wanning also noticed the terrible situation. She couldn't help but ask. Now, I can only take the risk and give it a try. Bailey Hongzhuang immediately said. Hearing this, Shang Wanning looked at Bailey Hongzhuang in surprise. She didn't know what Bailey Hongzhuang had thought of. Chapter 3494. However, she didn't expect Bailey Hongzhuang to actually come up with a solution. What solution do you have? Shang Wanning looked at Bailey Hongzhuang curiously and asked. Destroy with force. Bailey Hongzhuang narrowed her eyes. She could only try this method now. Shang Wanning and the others couldn't help but be stunned when they heard this. They didn't understand the true meaning of Bailey Hongzhuang's words. Bailey Hongzhuang didn't explain too much. Instead, she looked at Di Bei-chun, who was 500 meters away, and said, Bei-chun, I'm going to try the explosives. Hearing Bailey Hongzhuang's words, Di Bei-chun immediately nodded. Okay, pay attention to the distance. Bailey Hongzhuang emphasized, you know the range. Understood. Di Bei-chun responded without hesitation. Previously, when they were in Wuji Palace, Bailey Hongzhuang often studied explosives with Nangong Wu. In the end, the explosives they developed were very effective. However, Bailey Hongzhuang didn't use them many times. She didn't prepare much in her Chinquan bag. At this moment, there were only 2 sets of explosives left in her Chinquan bag. Fortunately, the 2 sets of explosives were quite effective. It should be able to achieve a good effect in the current situation. However, these skeletons were also very strong. Bailey Hongzhuang couldn't be sure how far they could go. With a distance of a few hundred meters, she couldn't throw the explosives in the middle of their team. Otherwise, it was very likely that it would affect their own people. Therefore, she could only throw the explosives on both sides of the team. Once it exploded, it would be a circular attack range. Therefore, she had to choose a good location. On one hand, it wouldn't affect their own people. On the other hand, it could also eliminate the skeletons in front of them to a large extent. After everyone heard the conversation between Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Bei-chun, their expressions couldn't help but change. Explosives? Hearing this unfamiliar word, everyone only felt speechless for a while. Explosives could still be effective against low-level cultivators, but against cultivators who had reached the Purple Realm, explosives had no effect at all. What's more, there were several skeletons of the third level of the Purple Realm within a 1-meter radius. Even if the explosives were used, they wouldn't be able to deal with a few skeletons. Wasn't that a joke? Those cultivating in the cave had been paying close attention to the situation of Bailey Hongzhuang and the others. When they heard Bailey Hongzhuang's words, they could not help but laugh. In my opinion, Bailey Hongzhuang is at her wit's end. She really can't think of any other way. She can even think of such a method. Is she dreaming? Explosives? I've only heard of these things when I was still in the Red Realm. Now that I've reached the Purple Realm, I'm afraid that these things won't affect me even if they explode next to me. They're too stupid to count on Bailey Hongzhuang. It's fine if she's going to die, but she's going to bring everyone to die with her. They'll regret it later. Everyone shook their heads. They looked at Bailey Hongzhuang and the others as if they were looking at a group of fools. In this world, heroes often didn't have good endings. Not only the cultivators in the cave, but Rinzime and the others were also stunned after hearing Bailey Hongzhuang's words. Hongzhuang, are you saying that we should use explosives to deal with these skeletons? Chapter 3495. After receiving Bailey Hongzhuang's confirmation, Rinzime and the others couldn't help but look at each other. They didn't know where Bailey Hongzhuang's confidence came from, but at this point in time, they could only do as she said and give a try. Rin Ziheng and the others' expressions were also very complicated. Previously, they thought that Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichen's decisions were very reliable, but at this moment, they couldn't help but feel that this suggestion was too unbelievable. Junior D, will the explosives that Junior Bailey mentioned really work? Rin Ziheng's lips twitched. At this critical moment, they really couldn't joke about it. Di Beichen smiled slightly. After noticing the complicated expressions on Ren Ziheng and the others' faces, he couldn't help but say, "Don't worry, Hongzhuang's explosives are not the same as ordinary explosives. It should have some effect." The others didn't know, but Di Beichen was very familiar with the effects of Bailey Hongzhuang's explosives. Although the opponent's strength had increased by a lot, he believed that the destructive power was still not small. Hearing Di Beichen's reply, Ren Ziheng and the others looked at each other. Although they were very confused, they didn't question it again. After all, from the beginning until now, Bailey Hongzhuang and the others' performance had proved that they weren't people who would shoot without thinking. Since they said so, they must have some degree of confidence. "Move!" Bailey Hongzhuang shouted coldly. The explosives in her hands were quickly ignited and thrown out. At the same time, she and Di Beichen's teams made the quickest choice. The Lich obviously didn't know what Bailey Hongzhuang was doing. He saw Bailey Hongzhuang suddenly throw a small package in his direction. He was puzzled, but he stood there and didn't dodge. Bailey Hongzhuang threw out the two explosives at the same time, towards the east and west of the team. Set up the elemental energy shield. Bailey Hongzhuang quickly said to everyone. Following Bailey Hongzhuang's voice, everyone in the team didn't hesitate to use their elemental energy to set up layers of protective shields. The multiple layers of elemental energy shields stacked together, emitting a bright light, showing its sturdy strength. At this moment, everyone had already regarded Bailey Hongzhuang as the backbone of the team, so they didn't have any objections to her decision. Everyone in the cave couldn't help but laugh when they saw that the practitioners in Bailey Hongzhuang's team actually set up elemental energy shields. Am I seeing things? It's just a set of explosives, yet they actually need to erect an elemental energy barrier. Could it be that their brains have gone stupid? This is the most interesting thing I've seen since I came to Penglai Island. Don't tell me they want us to watch a joke before they die. What can this little bit of explosives do? I'm afraid it can't even take down two skeletons. Everyone shook their heads. Originally, when Bailey Hongzhuang made such a decision, they already thought it was ridiculous. They didn't expect that the people in the team still believed in her so much. They couldn't help but wonder if these people had been brainwashed. In fact, the practitioners in the team were also very confused. However, Their trust in Bailey Hongzhuang was built up from the previous incident. Bang! Bang! Chapter 3496. Pung pung pung. The elemental energy ripples from the explosives kept hitting the elemental energy shield, creating ripples. Even though the shield was set up by everyone, it seemed like it could be broken at any time. The sudden movement was out of everyone's expectations. Other than Bailey Hongzhuang and a few others who had some understanding of the effects of the explosives, the rest of the practitioners could not help but be dumbfounded. What is this situation? Did I see wrongly? Is this the power of an explosive? I have never seen such a powerful explosive before. This has completely overturned my understanding. Everyone looked at the scene in front of them in a daze. This was simply too unbelievable for them. In their line of sight, on both sides of Bailey Hongzhuang, there were two huge pits. The surrounding skeletons were directly cleared out by the explosive. Cleared out. That's right. It was actually cleared out. The ground cracked inch by inch. The terrifying pit seemed to have gone through some kind of brutal attack. The Lich who had been clamoring earlier was directly turned into nothingness by Bailey Hongzhuang's explosive. The surrounding skeletons that were protecting the Lich were also turned into ashes. The place that was filled with skeletons suddenly had such a large empty area. Everyone was somewhat unable to react. Gulp. Not knowing who swallowed a mouthful of saliva, the rest of the practitioners in the group also had the same conditioned reflexes. For a moment, everyone looked at Bailey Hongzhuang with eyes filled with disbelief and unimaginable shock. Looking at the effect in front of her, Bailey Hongzhuang's eyes revealed a touch of satisfaction. Although the effect was slightly worse than the one she had tested in the Limitless Palace, but the strength of these skeletons was not ordinary. It was normal for the effect to be reduced. Overall, this method of using the explosives was still very successful. Hongzhuang, the power of your explosives is really not ordinary. Shangguan Yingying's eyes were filled with surprise. She knew that Bailey Hongzhuang had a certain level of strength in explosives, but the effect was still much better than what she had expected. Rinzi looked at Bailey Hongzhuang with a beautiful expression. Junior Sister Bailey, you've overturned my understanding time and time again. If it wasn't for the fact that all of this was happening right in front of her eyes, Rinzi Mei would find it hard to believe that explosives could have such an amazing effect. She had never seen such a powerful explosive before. Under the continuous shock, she felt that Bailey Hongzhuang really had the power to turn something rotten into something magical. It was obviously impossible, but in Bailey Hongzhuang's hands, it became possible. Jing Tianlang didn't say anything either because he was so shocked that he didn't know what to say. There was a faint feeling of excitement in his heart. If they could have more of these explosives, at least when facing the skeleton army in the future, they would have a little more breathing room. They would not be chased until they had nowhere to run. He only wanted to know where Bailey Hongzhuang's explosives had come from. If he could purchase it, then it would be a trump card in this training grounds. At least at the critical moment, he could save his life. But obviously, now is not the time to ask about this. Chapter 3497. Junior Brother D, Junior Sister Bailey's explosives are too powerful. The corner of Chu Jinfeng's mouth twitched. Who told him that explosives were not powerful? Come out, I'll definitely not kill you. If this kind of explosive landed on his body without warning, he wouldn't even know how he died. It was really too scary. Looking at Chu Jinfeng's exaggerated appearance, Deep Beichin couldn't help but smile. The power of Hongzhuang's explosives is indeed extraordinary. At this time, it has a very good effect. Previously, he had forgotten that Bailey Hongzhuang still had explosives on her. At this time, the effect of the explosives was indeed excellent. This is called a very good effect. Chu Jinfeng was secretly speechless. This effect is simply heaven-defying. As he spoke, Chu Jinfeng couldn't help but look at Ren Ziheng. Ren Zixing, am I right? If we have more of these explosives, we'll have a much easier time. In this way, once they were surrounded by the skeleton army, They could directly use the explosives to escape. It was much better than being chased until they had nowhere to run. Run Ziheng nodded. His gaze was still focused on the large pits on both sides of the road. The effect was too amazing. Until now, he still couldn't react. As far as he knew, explosives could never have such power. Why were the things that Bailey Hongzhuang took out completely different from what they usually saw? Not to mention the healing medicine. They usually couldn't even get their hands on it. Bailey Hongzhuang could take out so many at once. Now, with this kind of powerful explosives, just thinking about it, they knew that the price would be sky high. In fact, they hadn't even seen it before. Bailey Hongzhuang also took out the same thing. They were all humans, but the difference was too big. Indeed, the things that junior sister Bailey took out are all amazing things. Ren Ziheng couldn't help but sigh. He finally knew that junior sister Bailey was completely rich and overbearing. When these words were spoken, everyone in the group nodded in agreement. None of them had seen such a thing before. Today, not only had it saved their lives, it had also broadened their horizons. Xiren couldn't help but chuckle. In fact, he also admired Bailey Hongzhuang because Bailey Hongzhuang's attainments in these areas were simply too astonishing. Thinking about it, no matter who it was, when they saw Bailey Hongzhuang's abilities, they would have a feeling of anger. Fortunately, he had long been used to it. The skeletons on both sides of the road have been cleared. Let's hurry over. Although everyone was very surprised by the effect of Bailey Hongzhuang's explosives, they did not forget the danger they were in. Now that the skeletons on both sides of the road were gone, it was the best time for them to hurry. In the next moment, everyone quickened their pace and flew towards Bailey Hongzhuang and the others. Without the obstruction of the skeletons, the distance of a few hundred meters could be covered in the blink of an eye. Bailey Hongzhuang's gaze fell on the place where the lich was. She didn't expect that the zither technique couldn't kill the lich. In the end, the lich died under the effect of the explosives. It seemed that simple violence was the most effective in the end. Chapter 3498. Master, the power of your explosives is really not to be underestimated. Xiaohei could not help but sigh when she saw the destructive power of the explosives. Even if they were to unleash their martial arts techniques with all their might, they would only be able to clear out a small group of skeletons. However, the power of the explosives completely ignored all forms of power. Who could compare to the effect of clearing out the skeletons? Bailey Hongzhuang nodded. I feel that when we become inner palace disciples and come to this training ground again, we must bring more explosives with us. She only had 2 sets of explosives on her at the moment. Once they were used up, they would be gone. However, it was enough to solve today's urgent situation. If she were to come here again in the future, she would bring more explosives with her as a form of security. Master's right. No other method is as simple and violent as this. Xiao Bai's eyes sparkled brightly. Previously, when she saw the densely packed skeletons swarming towards them, it had caused her scalp to turn numb. Now that she had cleared out 2 groups of skeletons, she felt much more comfortable. Very soon, Bewitching and his group had arrived beside Bailey Hongzhuang's group. The surrounding skeletons were also quickly catching up to them. However, their speed was still a little slower than Bewitching's group. When she saw Bewitching standing in front of her, Bailey Hongzhuang's elegant and refined face could not help but reveal a joyful smile. My dear wife, it's been hard on you. Bewitching smiled at Bailey Hongzhuang and gave her thumbs up. His expression was filled with pride. Bailey Hongzhuang's performance today was truly outstanding. If she had not come to save them, the possibility of them returning to this place would have been too small. Bailey Hongzhuang smiled and glanced at the group behind Bewitching. When she saw that everyone was safe and sound, she could not help but say, "Let's go back to the cave first. Let's take advantage of the fact that these skeletons are unable to catch up to us and return to a safe place first." Although she had used explosives to clear out 2 areas, the skeletons were not slow. It would not take long for them to completely cover the area again. With their current state of elemental energy, if they were to be surrounded by the skeletons again, it would be extremely difficult for them to return. Thus, they had to seize this opportunity. Everyone nodded. They also knew that now was the time to seize the opportunity. Immediately, the two teams merged together and rushed towards the cave. When everyone in the cave saw that Bailey Hongzhuang and the others had successfully regrouped, their expressions changed. This was something that they thought was impossible, but they actually succeeded. In comparison, if Bailey Hongzhuang and the others had died in the hands of the skeletons, they might feel a little better. But now that they had returned safely, they had become the laughingstock instead. With everyone's concerted efforts, they successfully returned to the cave. Without the Lich's chanting ability, the skeleton's combat strength returned to how it was before, and it wasn't that difficult to deal with them. The moment they entered the cave, everyone heaved a sigh of relief. I didn't think that we would be able to return alive. It was unknown which practitioner took the lead to sigh with emotion. The practitioners in Bewitching's team all nodded their heads. This was the biggest feeling in their hearts at this moment. Chapter 3499. Bailey Hongzhuang and the others all heaved a sigh of relief, a relaxed smile appearing on their faces. Their previous actions were indeed very risky, but now that they had all returned safely, they were exceptionally happy. Junior Sister Bailey, your performance today has really opened our eyes. Chu Jinfeng smiled as he looked at Bailey Hongzhuang. Your zither technique is truly amazing. If it wasn't for you keeping the Lich in check, it would have been much more difficult for us to complete this mission. Bailey Hongzhuang smiled slightly, her exquisite face becoming even more beautiful. I just hit the jackpot, and it just so happened that it had a certain suppressive effect. If it wasn't for the fact that she had met the Lich today, she wouldn't have known that her zither technique was able to contend against the Lich. Now that she thought about it, it was really interesting. In the past, when we met the Lich, we were really helpless. This time, we met 4 Lich, and even getting close to them was extremely difficult. If it wasn't for you, our situation would have been very dangerous. Ren Ziheng smiled faintly, looking at Bailey Hongzhuang with eyes full of appreciation and gratitude. No matter what, Bailey Hongzhuang had helped them greatly this time. If it wasn't for her, he was almost certain that he wouldn't have been able to keep his life. Big brother, we really have to thank Junior Sister Bailey for being able to return safely this time. If it wasn't for Junior Sister Bailey taking the lead and asking to receive you, I'm afraid that no one would have stood out. Ren Zimei said bluntly. If it wasn't for Bailey Hongzhuang taking the lead and using such influential words to rally everyone, no one would have gone out to receive them. She was very clear in her heart that if it wasn't for Bailey Hongzhuang's existence, even if she had tried her best to rally everyone, she wouldn't have been able to achieve such an effect. After all, their previous actions were no different from courting death in everyone's eyes. When she thought about how, if she hadn't stood out, Ren Ziheng would have left her forever, her heart was filled with fear. Hearing Ren Zimei's words, Ren Ziheng and the others all looked at Bailey Hongzhuang. They didn't doubt Ren Zimei's words at all. In fact, when they saw Bailey Hongzhuang and the others coming out to receive them, their hearts were filled with shock. This was because no one would normally make such a choice. Indeed, we took the risk and listened to Junior Sister Bailey's suggestion. Fortunately, the result was good. A smile appeared on Jing Tianlong's face. When he had first heard the news, he also felt that Bailey Hongzhuang's actions was too crazy. But in the end, he was still influenced by Bailey Hongzhuang's words. And now, he was even more glad that he had listened to her suggestion. For a time, Bailey Hongzhuang's position in the hearts of Ren Ziheng's people was different. They knew all too well that the previous situation was really dangerous. According to their usual thinking, in order to reduce the losses to the minimum, most people would not choose to stand out. However, not only did Bailey Hongzhuang stand out herself, she even brought everyone with her. Most importantly, Bailey Hongzhuang really turned the situation around and changed the final outcome. In this regard, Bailey Hongzhuang was undoubtedly their savior. Chapter 3500. Hearing Bailey Hongzhuang's words, Rinzi Hang's men didn't hesitate and immediately looked at the other cultivators in the team. Instantly, everyone bowed together. Thank you for saving us, brothers and sisters. They knew too well what kind of friendship it was to be able to step forward in such a dangerous situation. If it wasn't for them, the other party wouldn't have risked their lives to save them. This deep affection was far from being able to be expressed with just a few words. It had to be engraved in one's heart. Looking at the actions of Ren Ziheng's men, Bailey Hongzhuang, and the rest revealed smiles on their faces. This is what we should do. There's no need to be so courteous. Didn't you go out to fight the liches so that we can live safely? That's right. There's no need for such formalities between brothers. From now on, we're brothers who share life and death together. After experiencing life and death, everyone felt completely different. Perhaps in the past, they still had selfish thoughts in their hearts, but after experiencing this incident, this selfishness had gradually dissipated and was replaced by an indescribable trust. No matter who it was extremely precious to have a friend who was willing to sacrifice their life for them. Obviously, after experiencing the incident just now, everyone had reached such a level of trust. No matter who it was, this was a great benefit. Compared to Bailey Hongzhuang and the rest who were happy and harmonious, the other cultivators in the cave had strange expressions on their faces. Previously, they didn't choose to step forward. Now that everyone had returned safely, it showed their selfishness instead. Regarding this, Ren Ziheng and the others naturally knew the reason why these people did not step forward. However, no one said anything, as it was good that they were well aware of it. At least after this incident, they knew who they could truly rely on and who wasn't suitable to be close to. The atmosphere in the cave became somewhat awkward, but everyone still stood outside the cave in an orderly manner to resist the attacks of the skeleton army. After the 4 liches were dealt with, the strength of the skeleton army seems to have weakened, and the frequency of their attacks seems to be less than before. Shangguan Yingying looked at the skeleton army that was constantly attacking outside the cave. She could keenly feel that the situation had changed. Hearing Shangguan Yingying's words, everyone turned to look outside the cave. After taking a closer look, everyone also noticed this difference. It's true. Xiren's eyes lit up. He was previously surrounded by the skeleton army, so he was very familiar with the attack frequency of the skeleton army. Now that he carefully sensed it, he discovered the difference between the two. Ren Ziheng sized up and said, "The liches are an existence of a higher level than the skeleton army. Now that the liches are collectively dead, the skeleton army is also suppressed, so their strength is not as before." Jing Tianlang nodded. "That's right. It's not far from daybreak. I believe the skeleton army will leave soon." As soon as this was said, a bright smile appeared on everyone's face. Chapter 3501. After the previous torment, we don't have much primary energy left in our bodies. Fortunately, it's not early now. I believe there won't be a problem to hold on until dawn. Chu Jinfeng's face was filled with a satisfied smile. This night, they persevered with great difficulty, but when they got through it, the joy was indescribable. Di Bei-chan stood by Bailey Hongzhuang's side, his handsome face as sharp as a knife, rippling with a faint, gentle, and doting smile. Did I make wifey worry before? Even though he was far away, he could still see the worry and nervousness in Bailey Hongzhuang's concerned eyes. Bailey Hongzhuang stared at Di Bei-chan. Her cherry-red lips pouted slightly, revealing a coquettish expression. "What do you think? In the future, you have to pay more attention to such dangerous things. You can't leave me here alone." If she didn't happen to have 2 sets of explosives in her hands, their current situation would be extremely dangerous. Hearing this, Di Bei-chan's lips curled into a faint smile. He nodded and said, "I will pay attention in the future." In today's situation, he and Wenziren had no other choice but to make such a choice. After all, they were all cultivators in good physical condition. No one was more suitable than them to stand out. If they had chosen to retreat at that time, they would have no face to see the other cultivators in the inner hall. Since they had chosen to live well in Penglai Palace, they naturally could not let themselves fall into such a situation. Moreover, such a choice could better protect Bailey Hongzhuang and Shangguan Yingying. My wife, it's all thanks to your protection today. Di Beichun was full of smiles. Now everyone knows that my wife is not ordinary. Bailey Hongzhuang glanced at Di Beichun. You're still in the mood to joke at a time like this. Di Beichun spread out his hands, the smile on his face unchanged. Now that we've overcome most of the crisis, we can hold on until dawn. What else is there to worry about? When Xiren also walked to Di Beichun's side. Hongzhuang, Yingying, your performance today was really outstanding. I have to commend you. Looking at Wen Xiren's appearance, Bailey Hongzhuang and Shangguan Yingying looked at each other, and both of them chose to ignore him. The sky gradually brightened. When the last trace of darkness disappeared, the skeleton army retreated like a tide and drilled into the ground. Looking at the world that had returned to normal, a relaxed smile appeared on everyone's faces. It's finally daybreak. The darkness before dawn is truly terrifying. I didn't think that we would be able to survive after encountering 4 deep pits. We are really lucky. Now I can finally rest for a while. My mental state has been tense for the whole night. I can't take it anymore. Everyone took a deep breath. This night was probably the longest and most difficult for them to endure. Every minute that passed seemed exceptionally long. Fortunately, they managed to endure until dawn. The exhausted cultivators immediately closed their eyes and began to rest. The exhaustion of mental energy and elemental energy for the entire night was truly frightening. If they didn't recover as soon as possible, none of them knew what kind of situation they would encounter tonight. Chapter 3502. After a night of battle, I'm sure everyone is exhausted. Let's take advantage of the fact that there won't be any more skeletons to disturb us. Let's quickly recover. Ren Ziheng glanced at everyone present. Although everyone's faces were brimming with joy, he could still see the exhaustion between their brows. After an entire night, everyone was simply too exhausted. Hence, what they needed the most now was a good rest. Hearing Ren Ziheng's words, everyone nodded their heads. Previously, they were immersed in their excitement and did not pay much attention to their own exhaustion. Now that they had relaxed, they felt an indescribable sense of exhaustion spreading throughout their body. That's right. Everyone, let's have a good rest first. Chu Jinfeng followed closely. Everyone was not pretentious. Only 2 cultivators were left to guard the situation outside the cave. The rest of the cultivators began to cultivate and recover their vitality. Bailey Hongzhuang closed her eyes and began to circulate the heaven-defying mental cultivation method. The elemental energy in her body had been squeezed dry. This feeling was extremely uncomfortable. Although there would not be any danger during the day, there was still one night before they had to leave this training ground. After what happened last night, none of them could be sure of what would happen on this last night. If this kind of thing happened again, they would really be unable to bear it. Originally, their group was full of injured cultivators. After last night's battle, their injuries were more serious than before. Furthermore, many of them had fallen. Not to mention the huge decrease in their battle strength. Their numbers had also decreased sharply. One could imagine how bad the situation was. However, now that they had reached this stage, everyone had no other choice. The only thing they could do was to recover their energy to the peak and maintain their best condition. They could only pray that they would not encounter such a thing again tonight. The cave regained its tranquility. Only the sound of everyone's breathing could be heard. The original large group had gathered and was divided into 2 camps. Between both sides, there was a sense of awkwardness. However, no one directly pointed it out. Both sides also maintained a certain distance from each other. Ren Ziheng's group also had some resentment in their hearts. They stood out to deal with the Lich so that everyone could have a better life. However, after they had sacrificed so much, these fellows completely ignored them in order to protect their own lives. It could be seen that their hearts were cold. Although the cultivators felt a little guilty, they didn't feel that they had done anything wrong, so they didn't say anything else. In the afternoon, Bailey Hongzhuang finally opened her eyes. Previously, the elemental energy in her dantian had been completely depleted, and the feeling of exhaustion was extremely uncomfortable. However, after she replenished the elemental energy in her dantian, she only felt that the capacity of her dantian had expanded a little compared to before. It was as if she had made some progress. She had experienced this kind of situation before, but the effect was not as good as this time. After thinking about it carefully, she understood that this was because everyone had channeled their origin power into her body, helping her expand the capacity of her dantian. Speaking of which, this could be considered as a fluke. It was originally a very risky move, but she didn't expect to reap such benefits in the end. It seemed that the saying that danger and opportunity coexisted was not false at all. Chapter 35:03. If she were to encounter such a situation again, she might not be able to confidently leave her back to the other cultivators. After all, it was hard to tell what was in a person's heart. Fortunately, she had won the bet this time. If these people were not inner palace disciples, but outer palace disciples, it would definitely not have happened. After Bailey Hongzhuang exited her cultivation state, she realized that most of the other cultivators had recovered to their best condition. At this moment, they were all immersed in the joy of surviving a great disaster. Seeing that Bailey Hongzhuang had opened her eyes, Ren Ziheng and the others' gazes fell on Bailey Hongzhuang. "Junior sister Bailey, you've recovered?" Bailey Hongzhuang nodded slightly. Her clear eyes revealed some surprise. She did not expect to be watched by so many people when she opened her eyes. She immediately smiled and said, "Yes, I've recovered." The smile on Ren Ziheng's face became gentler. He said, "Junior sister Bailey, I asked where you got the explosives from?" Ever since he had witnessed the power of the explosives used by Bailey Hongzhuang, Ren Ziheng had been constantly thinking about the explosives. If he could also obtain the explosives, it would undoubtedly be more secure when he came to this training ground in the future. Not only Ren Ziheng, but the others were also extremely enthusiastic about this question. At this moment, seeing that Ren Ziheng had taken the initiative to ask this question, everyone naturally could not help but pay attention. Even those cultivators who had previously refused to go out with Bailey Hongzhuang quietly pricked up their ears. If there was a chance, they would definitely think of a way to buy the explosives back. "Yes, junior sister Bailey, I've never heard of the power of your explosives. It really surprised me." Chu Jinfeng looked curiously at Bailey Hongzhuang. He had long wanted to ask, but his body's condition was really too bad previously. Therefore, he could only put this question in his heart and wait until his Yuan Li recovered before asking. Looking at everyone's curious look, Bailey Hongzhuang smiled and said, "I brought these explosives from the outside world. There are only 2 sets in total. Previously, I had almost forgotten about the existence of these explosives. I didn't expect them to be so effective." As soon as these words were spoken, everyone couldn't help but feel slightly disappointed. However, they weren't surprised by this outcome. After all, if such a powerful explosive was a product of Penglai Island, it would have been famous long ago. It was impossible for them not to have heard of it. However, since the explosives were brought from the outside by Bailey Hongzhuang, then the idea of buying the explosives would have to be dispelled. In that case, we won't be able to buy this explosive in the future. Ren Ziheng was a little unwilling to give up. It was not easy to find such a useful tool, but he did not expect that it would be useless in the end. Bailey Hongzhuang turned to look at Di Beichen. Di Beichen gave her a trusting smile. No matter what choice Bailey Hongzhuang made, he would support her. That may not be the case. If there is, I will inform Senior Brother Ren. How about that? She indeed only had 2 sets of explosives on her, and she had already used them up. If she wanted to make more, it would be a very simple matter for her. You're tuning into the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.